We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Welcome to this episode of Tim Coffeen Talks Indy Car and Racing History. During each program, Tim will take you behind the scenes and share stories and memories from his long career in the world of Indy Car competition. With 7 championship rings to his credit, Tim not only understands auto racing history, he has lived it. And now, for the most famous words in racing history. Drivers, start your engine!
Well, thank you for that fine introduction. And the crowd is here, the engines are roaring, and we have Tim Coffeen Talks IndyCar and Auto Racing History. I'm Joe Ziemba, just proud as heck to be working with Tim on this. And tonight, Tim's going to have a special episode he'll talk about, a special year of 2002. It's the 20th anniversary when Cristiano da Matta roared to the kart championship. And Tim has always said that this was one of the best years of his racing career, but it was also the last great year for the kart series. So, Tim, as we said, you've often mentioned the year 2002 was perhaps the most rewarding season for you personally while you were with Newman-Haas. But before we move into that area, can you tell us what the landscape of open-wheel racing looked like 20 years ago in 2002?
Sure. 2002, the big news at the start of the year was that Penske Racing, Roger Penske, took his team and left kart and went to the IRL. Kart was still a very, very strong series. I mean, we had Newman-Haas, of course, and Chip Ganassi Racing, Forsyth Racing, Pac West, Bobby Rahal's team, Patrick Racing, Derek Walker. They had a really strong field of cars. We had 3 engine manufacturers, Toyota, Honda, and Cosworth. And one of the most impressive things about this era was that we had 19 races that year in kart. And we raced in the United States. We had 3 races in Canada, 2 in Mexico, raced in Japan, England, and Australia. A total of 19 races all over the world. We had natural road courses. We raced on street courses and ovals. Kart was we had a very, very strong series. We had tremendous amount of engine manufacturers and great teams, a lot of great race drivers. In the racing worldwide, it was just one heck of a series, and it was tough to win a championship in that series.
So, Tim, you're saying then that Newman-Haas was racing outside of the U.S. for most of the season. How did that affect you and your teammates with all that travel?
Well, we raced 6 races out of the country, which was we still had 13 races in the U.S., but when you travel overseas, it's unbelievable. Like we would race in Australia and then turn around, fly out. We'd race on a Sunday in Australia, turn around and fly back to the States, basically losing a day. And we'd go to race at Fontana, California, which was a 2-mile oval. Surfers Paradise, Australia was a street circuit. Setup on the cars is completely different. And you have to prep a car in a day to run on a 2-mile oval. And you're fighting jet lag too. So the travel was one of the hardest parts of that era. Yes, it was.
From my recollection, as old and feeble as I'm becoming, didn't you get hurt in Australia?
Yeah. In 1997, I got run over. I was changing the right front in a Michael Andretti's car. Raul Bosell ran me over, turned in too sharply into his pit, and he ran over my right leg. And I was really, really lucky. I didn't break anything. I had some nerve problems in my foot for a couple years, but yeah, I was lucky. That's all I'll say.
And how about your owner, Carl Haas? Did he have a special nickname for you after that?
Yeah, Carl called me the hurt guy.
Well, I'm going to draw you back to 2002. And maybe this is a sensitive topic, but what caused the split in open wheel racing, and really, how did it affect Newman-Haas?
Well, it really affected Newman-Haas. About 1991, I think Tony George started. Tony George, the Holman George family, owned the Speedway, and he took control of the track around 1990. And he decided shortly thereafter that he wanted a bigger voice in kart. He wanted to restructure the board, and they weren't going for that. And he decided to start his own series. And in the end, in 1996, he started a series called the IRL. And I know that I thought they would get something accomplished before we went to Indianapolis in 96 where we'd be able to race there. But Carl Haas called us all around in the back shop for a meeting and told us that they'd exhausted every avenue possible to try to come together on terms to go to the Speedway that year. And Tony George had instituted a policy where he said if he did not run in a series, he was only going to leave 8 of the 33 spots at Indianapolis open for non-IRL members. So that was the famous 25-8 controversy. And Carl and Paul Newman had a lot of they had big sponsor money involved in our racing team, obviously. And you never know at Indianapolis. You could get 3 days of qualifying rained out in only one day. And how can you tell your sponsors that if you missed the race down there, it was just a really bad situation. And we didn't go to Indianapolis, and that we didn't go back to Indianapolis until 2008. So it was a very, very unfortunate time. The series split. The fan interest, there was a lot of animosity in the fan bases rooted for each series. It just wasn't a healthy time. That was when NASCAR really came on in bounds. I remember walking at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, with my friend Robin Miller, and a fan yelled at him, "Who's winning? The IRL or?" And Robin said, "NASCAR," and that was when NASCAR really came on during that time period too. So it was a tough period. It really was to be in racing, and especially for a guy like me that grew up in Indianapolis and always dreamed about being on a winning team at Indy, and find yourself racing in other places during the month of May. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Well, you've described the turbulence going on off the track, but you've also said that 2002 was a great year for both yourself and Newman-Haas. Can you add to that statement, Tim?
Well, going back, we hadn't won a championship. Newman-Haas was Newman-Haas. We wanted to win, and we had not won since Mansell won in '93. Had won a championship. There had been a lot going on. I mean, we switched chassis makers for a couple years. We went from Carl Haas sold Lola cars, and we left Lola and went to Swift for 3 years. Honda came into the series, and we stayed with Cosworth engines. Goodyear, Firestone came in to compete as a tire supplier against Goodyear, and Firestone really came on great leaps and bounds. And we stayed with Goodyear until they left, and we finally went to Firestone. But there was a lot that happened, and we won some races, but we didn't have near the success we did in the early 90s. So coming up to 2002, I mean, we were really hungry to win a championship, and that's one of the things. That was several of the things that contributed to that being such a great season. I mean, just the hunger to win and getting it done was a real thrill.
And of course, your team added a young, energetic, and ambitious driver. What was the background with getting da Matta over to Newman-Haas?
Well, Michael Andretti and Carl in 2000, they had contract discussions, problems, and Michael decided to leave and went to Team Green, which became Andretti Green Racing. And we were running Cosworth engines. So at the end of the year, Carl announced that we were going to go over to Toyota, and Cristiano da Matta was going to be our new driver. He'd been a Toyota driver for Cal Wells Racing. He was a young and up-and-coming driver.
And what was his family background? Was there any racing before he got to Indy Car?
Well, Cristiano raced in Indy Lights, and I know he raced in Europe. His father, Toninho da Matta, was I believe a 14-time touring car champion in Brazil, had his eyes on Formula One. I believe Toninho had a serious accident and it curtailed his career. But he had a family. He had a racing background, definitely.
Well, during that season, da Matta captured 7 races and also 7 pole positions. What made him such a special driver in your eyes?
Well, Cristiano was he was. I remember when he first came to us at Monterrey, Mexico, the first race he drove for us. A lot of these IndyCar guys, big entourages, and they got their Newell motor coaches, their buses, and everything. And Cristiano pulled up outside our tent in Monterrey, Mexico, the first time he drove for us, and he was driving a Volkswagen Bug with his dad, an old Volkswagen with his dad, and he got out and he had a backpack on. He's 5'6". He looked like a school kid, but boy, he got in that race car and he won the first time he ever drove for us at Monterey. And I mean, he made a statement right off the bat. And Cristiano was just a super, he was very, very patient driver. He would let races come to him. He didn't get all emotional. He was really smart. He was good with chassis. He was just the whole package. He came to us, and I mean, the first year he won the first race and then the last 2 races of the season, in Australia and in Fontana, the 500-mile race in Fontana. And in between, we struggled. It wasn't his fault. I mean, we were getting to know each other, and it took a little bit. But I mean, when we got it together right, it came together.
Hey, let's move away from the driver and we'll get back to da Matta, but would you care to tell us who some of the Newman-Haas crew members were that year and how they helped Matta achieve such exceptional results in 2002?
Well, that crew in 2002, to me, to this day, those guys are, how could I say it? I mean, they're almost like a band of brothers to me. It's one of the greatest relationships on a racing team that I ever had in my life. And we won races all over the world, and we traveled everywhere. I mean, we still stay in touch to this day. I mean, Donnie Hubbell's the chief mechanic on the car. He's still a close friend. He's got a vintage business in Chicago. He takes care of vintage race cars for a lot of people. He's very successful. Todd Phillips. Todd and I worked together on da Matta's car. He's one of my best pals in racing. He's Takuma Sato's chief mechanic to this day at Dale Coyne Racing. James Renaud he came to us as a 19-year-old kid. And, I mean, he just could tell right off the bat he was really smart, had a big future in front of him. Tim Homburg. I worked with Tim in the early 80s at Patrick Racing. And Tim comes from a racing family. We call him Dog. His dad was a flagman in the Badger Midget Racing Association. He came from a racing background. He was a great fabricator, tire changer. Davey Evans. Davey is, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He was Davey came over with Jackie Stewart in 1971 when Carl Haas ran the L&M Lola in the Can-Am series, and Davey was he was one of the guys that he would do anything for you on the race car, and he was one of the best teammates and best friends I ever had. Johnny Littlefield, he was our gearbox guy. Johnny can do anything on a race car. He's a shock engineer. He's the fueler on the car. He's just another one of those guys that I still to this day I still talk to quite often. Kenny Seawick was on our team with us, building shocks at the time. Colin Duff was a shop foreman. Colin's from Scotland originally, and he ran the shop. We had a TZ, John Tzazonikis was the team manager. I've known John for almost 50 years. Brian Lyles was an engineer. We had a really, really good engineer from Toyota. His name was Laerte Zada, and he did a great job with our engines that year. Craig Hampson was one of the engineers on our team, and Matt Beckman, he's an engineer in NASCAR to this day. So we had an incredible lineup. But the one guy that came in that year was Guillaume Roquelin. He came from he was French, and he came over here, and he was involved in Indy Car in the 90s, and he came to Newman-Haas, and him and Cristiano hit it off right away. And they really, really, you could tell they had a chemistry between them. And it was just, we had a great team. Pete Gibbons, he was over all of engineering. We had a great team, and it was one of the most fulfilling years of my life, and it was because of these people I just mentioned. Plus, all these guys over the wall, we had a fantastic pit crew. More often than not, we would gain spots in the pits when we came in. And Cristiano, you asked me earlier about Cristiano, and that was one of his strengths. I remember at Chicago, he was running third in the race at the Oval, and he came on the radio. He was racing with Dario Franchitti and Bruno Junqueira, and Cristiano was running third. And Chicago's a tight track, hard to pass on, and Cristiano comes on the radio and he says, "I'm going to bring it in the pits and see what you guys can do." And as the pit sequence came out, we came in first, and then the other two came in. We ended up getting them in the lead in the pits. So that's what kind of crew we had that year.
And it sounds like you guys all got along on your worldly travels. What did you like to do with the team? Or was there any free time, say if you're in Australia or Germany or someplace? Did the crew get together at night?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we go out to eat. When you first get there, you usually get a day or so travel-wise to Australia has one of the most surfer's paradise of the ocean. The beach down there is one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever been on. The sand's actually white. They take meticulous care of the beach. It's a surfing beach. It's a resort area, and I'm just going to say it. It's hell getting down there and coming back because it's like 12 to 14 hours from Los Angeles one way to Brisbane in an airplane. And then you got an hour and a half bus ride from the Brisbane airport to your hotel at Surfer's Paradise. But once you get there, it was an awful lot of fun to go around the world with these guys. And it's double the fun when you're winning races. That's the icing on the cake.
It was such a great season in 2002 with, as I mentioned, those 7 wins. What happened with da Matta and the team the following year in 2003?
Well, Cristiano was a contract driver to Toyota, and they wanted him to go to Formula One. And they took him and went to Formula One. But Toyota had been trying to win championship in kart since the 90s. And Honda had won 6 straight. They won with Ganassi, and Ganassi had 3 different drivers, Jimmy Vasser, Zanardi, and Montoya win championships for Honda. And then Penske went with Honda, and DeFerrin won some championships for him. But when Toyota won their championship, they took Cristiano to Formula One, and the landscape changed dramatically because Toyota and Honda both left kart and went to the IRL, and many teams also went. Basically, Newman-Haas and Forsyth Racing stayed with Champ Car. It was kart for one more year, and then it became Champ Car. But the landscape kept changing, and it was tough to see all this happening. When we had 3 engine manufacturers, and all of a sudden you're down to 1. I remember with Cristiano, Laerte, sometimes our engine, we'd be running. If you had 3 over revs over 18,000 RPM, they'd tell you to pull the engine out. Well, the next year we're running. Cosworth was like the spec engine, and then to make engines last longer, they drastically reduced the RPMs down to like 12,500. So a lot went away when Toyota and Honda left, and we lost Cristiano, and the series, it started changing a lot.
Big changes. Did da Matta ever return to Indy Car racing?
Yeah, he did. He had 2 years with Toyota in Formula One. He scored points in Formula One. He had his 2003 season. He did a pretty darn good job, and then 2004, the team struggled, and I can't put it all on him, but things didn't work out for him, and he left Toyota and he came back to the States. And he drove on the PKB team. He won a race he won Portland in 2005, but we didn't have the success we had after he left, and he didn't have the success he had with us after coming back to the States.
Well, sadly, da Matta was involved in a horrific but very unpredictable accident in 2006, and I realize it still might bother you to talk about it, but what happened to Cristiano in 2006 with that accident?
Unfortunately, we were testing up at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. It's a little over 4-mile road course, a lot of woods. A deer got out on the track, and he was climbing a hill. It's a blind corner coming up a hill underneath a bridge, and he came around the corner, and there was a deer standing in the track, and he hit the deer, and the deer came into the car and hit him in the head. And thank God that the Wisconsin Brain Neurological Center is in Neenah, Wisconsin, because it's centrally located in the state. And there was a helicopter there. And they got him immediately into a helicopter and flew him. They'd have never got there in time because there's a lot of lakes around Elkhart Lake, and you'd have to drive around these lakes to get to Neenah. But thank God there was a helicopter there that got him there in time, and they did immediate surgery. They had to remove part of his skull because his brain was swelling. It was a horrific accident. It hurt. I mean, I went to see him in the hospital on weekends off. I drove up there a couple times to see him, and he was really hurt. It was a bad deal.
Did he ever drive again in a racing car after that accident, or was that it for him?
No, he never ran Indy cars again. He ran some sports car races, and then called it quits. He's got a lovely wife and 2 little beautiful children. He's doing well, but it was just a tragic accident. It could have been. I mean, we still have him, but it was just a freak deal, and it was just sad.
Due to the split in the 2 racing organizations, da Matta never did get to run the 500, I understand. Were there any other really good drivers who never got that opportunity because of the long split between the organizations?
Well, 2 that come to mind immediately would be Greg Moore, who he had signed at he was driving for Forsyth Racing, and he was in his last race for Forsyth at Fontana before he left to go to drive for Penske Racing. And unfortunately, he was fatally injured in the California 500. And that's how Helio Castroneves came to drive for Penske, because of Greg Moore's accident. And the other driver that didn't get to run Indy was Alex Zanardi, who was he won 2 championships for Ganassi in kart, and he also ran a Formula One. But Zanardi was a heck of a chauffeur. The thing that's sad about da Matta and Zanardi and Greg Moore not running the Speedway, it's sad for them they didn't get to run. But the biggest thing for me, I think, is that the racing fans didn't get to see these great drivers run there during this time period. They could drive any kind of configuration, track, road course, street course, oval. It didn't matter. They were magnificent race car drivers, and because of the split, so to speak, the fans never got to see them, and that's sad.
Did you ever think the split would last as long as it did?
You know, Joe, it was just so frustrating when it happened. Here's a guy like me that grew up in Indianapolis, and I love the 500, and I find myself in the craziest places during the month of May. I mean, racing in Mexico and Japan and Brazil, and it was just. And after a while, I'm not saying I got bitter about it, but I remember that one May, they just finally, CART stopped scheduling races in May. And Carl and Bernie Haas told us to take a week off, take a vacation week during May. And I went to Florida during the month of May. It was just a really confusing time. I didn't understand it. And those are the best years of my racing career. So I could, I don't know, say I could be bitter about it, but that's just the way it went. I had no control over it, but it was a really, really odd time. It wasn't in racing, and especially for me being on such a good racing team. We had, any time we went to the track, we felt we could win, and that's the race you want to win, the big race. The 2 goals in racing, I said before, you want to win the 500 and you want to win the championship. Not to even go to Indy was. I
want to ask you a tough question. It's one that I've thought about over the years, but you had 2 very visible, knowledgeable, intelligent owners in Carl Haas and Paul Newman. Were they always together along with the split, or did one want to go back? Maybe that's something you don't care to talk about, but your opinions.
No, I think that, Carl's a very smart businessman. And I know that when those engine manufacturers, Toyota and Honda, went over to the IRL, that they came after him. And then Carl's a businessman. And Paul Newman was not a fan of the IRL whatsoever. He was really upset what they did. He thought it was wrong. And I know him and Carl had discussions about it. And I'll never forget at the Christmas party. Carl and Bernie always had a Christmas party at their home in Lake Forest. And it was a gala affair. I mean, everyone always looked forward to it every year. But anyway, I was in the back room of his house. Trevor Weston and I, one of our other teammates, were talking to Carl, and he was talking to us about the potential of going to the IRL, and then what his reasoning was for doing that. And Carl said, I've got 30-some people working for me, and not just the people that work for me, but they got families, they got wives, they got children, and we talk about, we've got insurance for our employees and everything, and we got to take care of our people. And he goes, I got to look at the big picture on all this. And it's easy to criticize someone, but when you talk to an owner that's talking about caring about his employees, there's a lot that goes into it. So it was a really tough period. And it was, I know Carl and Newman had some words about it, but they stayed together, thank God, and we kept racing.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your honest appraisal of that. I felt a little uncomfortable asking you, but that's the reason you're talking IndyCar history. So we get all this good inside stuff. Well, before we let you go, you obviously tonight have shared a great deal, as well as your respect for da Matta. How do you think he should be remembered as a driver?
Well, Cristiano, I feel really, as I said earlier, he's one of the greatest drivers I ever worked for. He was so smart and smooth. He treated the guys with incredible respect, and he was the whole package. I mean, he had a great sense of humor. There was a lot to Cristiano that a lot of people maybe didn't see, and you could just tempt him to tease him to do something. Like I gave him my room key one time out on the grid of the race, and Oriol Servia was standing next to us. He started next to Oriol. I said, "Give him your room key," and he looked at me and I said, "Tell him you're checking out." And he goes, "Good idea." And he walked straight over to Servia and he handed him this room key. And he goes, Servia says, "What's that for?" And he goes, "Because I'm checking out the start, man. See you later." I mean, he would do anything. I mean, he was very, very, I don't know. He was a warm guy, and he was a teammate. He was a team player. We had a lot of fun together. One thing a lot of people may not know, he's really a gifted musician. He's a great guitar player. He walked into our shop the first time in Chicago, and I was one of those long-haired weirdos in my younger years, and I had a picture of Jimi Hendrix on my bench, and Cristiano went straight over to that picture and says, "Who does this belong to?" And I said, "It's mine." He goes, "We're going to get along, man." And I said, and we had, it was just his family was great, and he was just a great, we had a lot of fun together. And you always knew you were going to get it back in the race when he got in the car. And him and Rocky together, the engineer, they had a great relationship, and we just had a great team. And it was one of those years after several years of struggling and to win a championship and dominate. I mean, he had 11 podiums that year, 7 wins, 7 poles. He was on the 11. He only, as far as I remember, he only made 2 mistakes all year that year he won the championship. He locked up the brakes in practice at Toronto. It damaged the left front corner. And I think he spun off the track at Mid-Ohio in the race. He was chasing Carpentier, trying to get around him for the lead, and he got in his air and spun. But he was just, he did a magnificent job that year, and he's one of the greatest race car drivers I think that's come down the pike. The fans at Indy didn't get to see him, which is really sad, but I got to work with him, and I'm proud to say that I did.
Oh, thank you as always, Tim, for sharing your thoughts on what was both a wonderful yet sad time in open wheel racing here on the 20th anniversary season of da Matta's championship. And I just wanted to remind our listeners that if you missed any previous episodes, go to sportshistorynetwork.com. And of course, look for Tim Coffeen Talks Indy Car and Racing History, and all the episodes will be there. Both there. They're also on various platforms, such as YouTube. So you can listen to Tim just about anywhere. And Tim, before we go, would you like to add anything else about that magical 2002 season?
Well, for me, it was you used the word magical, and it was like the guys on the crew. We're a band of brothers. We're, say, friends for life, and we had a great race car driver. We had Rocky did a fabulous job as a race engineer. It was just to travel the world like we did, like I said, to win all those races and travel everywhere we went. I mean, we had a great time, and we put Newman-Haas. We got back up front where we needed to be. And when you're racing, you always want everyone else to know you're there. And that year they knew we were there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the magic from that magical season. And we've been it's very gratifying to see listeners showing up from all over the world now to listen to Tim Coffeen. And so if you have friends out there that don't know about Tim's special episode show here on the Sports History Network, please let them know. But thanks again, Tim. Thanks to all for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye now.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
It was just another ordinary day in the offices of the Pittsburgh Guardian newspaper circa 1924. But for Marla Delft, assistant editor, everything was about to change. For she was about to discover the awesome attractiveness of Row 1 brand retro sports paraphernalia items thanks to Orville Mulligan, sports writer.
And there it is.
Wow, Orville, that's really the bee's knees.
Isn't it just? A poster-sized replica of the actual 1909 World Series program cover.
I can see that. But where did you get it? And where'd you get it framed?
I ordered it from the Row 1 website, where over 6,000 items of sports memorabilia from the 1880s to the 1990s are available for reproduction, in multiple sizes and in several different materials, with over a dozen styles of frame to choose from for prints like this.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Delft would love to put up more of these in the office. But I'm equally as sure they're beyond this newspaper's budget.
Not at all, my dear Marla. See for yourself. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. Oh my, these are good prices. Oh, and look at this stuff. Oklahoma-Nebraska football, college basketball art, Michael Jordan items.
And so it
retro
was that
sports
Marla Delft
advertisement
discovered the
placards.
splendiferous magic of Row 1 sports memorabilia, arts, and prints. You can too by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/row1. That's ROW1 today for access to the full Row 1 catalog of gallery prints and gifts like t-shirts, long-sleeve shirts, telephone cases, coffee mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Act today for 15% discount off all prints with coupon code SHN15 and 20% off all other items with coupon code SHN20 at checkout. And keep your dial locked to the Sports History Network for the exciting chronicles of the 1920 sports world in Orville Mulligan, sports writer. Coming soon.